Have you ever thought about how a moment of terror can turn into a lifelong search? What would you do if you had to find the person who saved you when you thought everything was over? Tell us in the comments if you've lived through a moment that changed your life forever, because today I'm going to tell you a story that will break your heart. It was May 12, 2008, 2:28 p.m. in Sichuan Province, China. Xiao Lin, a girl of only 8 years old, was sitting at her desk on the second floor of Beichuan Elementary School, trying to solve a math problem when the earth began to move in a way she had never felt before. The 8.0 magnitude earthquake arrived without warning, like a furious beast awakening from the depths of the earth. Within seconds, the concrete walls cracked like paper, windows shattered into 1,000 pieces, and the ceiling collapsed onto the small bodies of 400 students who screamed in terror. Can you imagine being in a place you consider safe and suddenly having it become your worst nightmare? How do you think a child would react in that situation? Share your opinion with us, because what happened next is something that marked this little girl's life forever. Xiao Lin was trapped under a concrete beam that crushed her legs. The dust was so thick she could barely breathe, and the metallic taste of blood filled her mouth. Around her, she heard the desperate cries of her classmates, some asking for help, others calling for their mothers in the midst of absolute darkness. For 6 endless hours, Xiao Lin remained conscious, clinging to the family photo she carried in her backpack. Her small hands trembled as she tried to move the debris, but every movement caused unbearable pain. The smell of dust, concrete, and fear had become part of the air she breathed. When she had lost hope and her strength was fading, she heard a voice in English shouting orders from somewhere among the rubble. An international rescue team had arrived at the scene, and among them was Sergeant David Mitchell, a 25-year-old American soldier who was part of a unit specialized in emergency rescues. Have you ever heard a voice that brought back hope when everything seemed lost? Do you believe there are people who come into our lives at exactly the moment we need them? Let us know your experience. David had been working without rest for 18 hours, moving debris with his bare hands until they bled. His uniform was soaked with sweat and dust, but when he heard Xiao Lin's weak cry from the depths of the rubble, he knew he couldn't give up. With a determination that only those who have seen too much suffering possess, David crawled through a tunnel of debris that was barely half a meter high. The stones cut his back, the air was scarce, but he followed the sound of the girl's voice like a compass guiding him toward the light. When he finally saw Xiao Lin's frightened eyes in the darkness, David felt his heart break into 1,000 pieces. The little girl was pale, with dry lips and a wound on her forehead, but conscious. "Hey, little angel," he whispered in English with a smile that tried to hide his concern. "I'm going to get you out of here." Although Xiao Lin didn't understand the words, something in David's voice, in the tenderness of his blue eyes and in the confidence of his movements, made her feel that she was finally safe. For the first time in hours, she stopped crying and smiled shyly at the stranger who had arrived like a guardian angel. Do you believe that love and protection transcend language barriers? Have you ever felt that immediate connection with someone you just met? We want to know your opinion. The rescue was the most difficult thing David had faced in his military career. He had to use his own hands to move rocks weighing more than 110 pounds, while keeping Xiao Lin awake by singing songs in English and telling her stories about his little sister in Ohio. He gave her small sips of water from his canteen and assured her that she would soon be with her family. After 3 hours of meticulous work, David managed to create a space large enough to get Xiao Lin out. With infinite care, he carried her in his arms as if she were made of glass, protecting her head with his helmet as they navigated through the maze of debris toward the surface. When they finally emerged into the open air, Xiao Lin blinked at the sunlight that she seemed to have forgotten existed. David ran with her to the ambulance, speaking to her in English and basic Chinese he had learned during his stay in the country. "You're safe now, little one. Todo está bien, pequeña." The doctors took Xiao Lin immediately to treat her injuries. She had a fractured leg and severe bruises, but she was alive. David accompanied her until her parents arrived, who had been desperately searching for her among the rubble of what was once their daughter's school. Have you ever witnessed a miracle? What do you think about these survival stories that defy all odds? Share with us in the comments what you find most impressive about this story. When Xiao Lin's parents arrived at the hospital, they found David sitting next to their daughter's bed, teaching her words in English while she taught him words in Chinese. The connection between the American soldier and the Chinese girl was so evident that the doctors thought they were family. David had to leave the next day. His unit had been called to another disaster zone, and duty awaited him. Before leaving, he gave Xiao Lin his military identification bracelet and promised her that someday they would see each other again. "This is so you remember that you're the bravest little girl I've ever met," he told her as he placed the bracelet on her small wrist. Xiao Lin, with tears in her eyes, gave him her favorite family photo and drew a heart on the back with a red crayon. "Para que no me olvides," she said in Chinese, even though she knew he didn't fully understand her words. Years passed and Xiao Lin grew up with David's bracelet always on her wrist and the story of the American soldier engraved in her heart. Her parents told her over and over how she had been rescued, and she never stopped wondering what had become of her blue-eyed guardian angel. Have you ever kept something that reminds you of a special person who marked your life? Do you believe that objects can hold memories and emotions? Tell us in the comments what you keep as a treasure. At 16, Xiao Lin had learned English perfectly, motivated by the desire to someday communicate with David. She began searching for information about him on the internet, contacting American military bases, veteran organizations, and any institution that could help her. Her search intensified when she turned 20. She had studied international relations, inspired by wanting to build bridges between cultures as David had done with her. Every year, on the anniversary of the earthquake, she posted on social media the story of her rescue with the only blurry photo she had of the rescue team. Xiao Lin's story went viral in 2020, when a Chinese television program decided to help her in her search. Thousands of people shared her story, moved by this 15-year search that had captured hearts around the world. What do you think about the power of social media to reconnect people? Have you ever used the internet to find someone from your past? We want to know your experience. It was a retired veteran in Michigan who recognized the story. He had served alongside David on several missions and remembered perfectly how his friend had talked for years about the little Chinese angel he had rescued from the rubble. He immediately contacted the show's producers. David Mitchell, now 40, worked as a rescue instructor in Colorado and was married with 2 young daughters. When he received the call about Xiao Lin, he couldn't believe that after so many years, the little girl who had marked his military life was looking for him. The reunion was organized through a live video call during the television program. When Xiao Lin saw David's face on the screen, now with some wrinkles but the same kind eyes, she began to cry while showing him the bracelet she had worn all these years. David was also moved to tears. "I never forgot about you, little angel," he said with a broken voice. "You were the reason I continued being a rescuer. Every time I saved someone, I thought about you and how your smile gave me hope that day." Do you believe that people enter our lives to teach us something specific? What do you think about these reunions that transcend time and distance? Xiao Lin showed him how she had grown, told him about her career, about how she had founded an organization that helps children affected by natural disasters. David shared photos of his daughters and told her how the story of her rescue had inspired his career as a rescue instructor. But the story had an even more beautiful ending. In October 2023, David traveled to China with his family to meet Xiao Lin in person. The encounter at Beijing airport was emotional. The 8-year-old girl he had rescued was now a 23-year-old woman, successful and full of life. Together they visited the site where the school once stood. Now there was a beautiful memorial dedicated to the earthquake victims and a park where children played freely. Standing in that place that had marked their lives forever, Xiao Lin and David hugged as they remembered the day that united them forever. "You gave me a second life," Xiao Lin told him in perfect English. "And I want you to know that I've used it to help others, just like you helped me. Your kindness multiplied into thousands of acts of love." David smiled with tears in his eyes. "Xiao Lin, you taught me that saving one life can change the world. Every person I've trained, every life they've saved, carries a little bit of your light with them. Who do you owe your life to, or a moment of hope that you've never been able to thank? What act of kindness have you received that changed your perspective on humanity? Share it in the comments. Today, Xiao Lin and David maintain a friendship that has transcended cultures and continents. She has visited the United States. He returns to China regularly. Their families have become friends, and both have created cultural exchange programs for young rescuers. This story teaches us that acts of heroism transcend borders, languages, and time. That an extended hand in the darkest moment can illuminate an entire life. Xiao Lin searched for 15 years to say thank you, and discovered that her rescuer had also been thinking about her all these years. We never know how our actions can change someone else's life. A moment of courage, a word of encouragement, a gesture of love can create ripples that extend for decades and cross oceans. In a world that sometimes seems divided, stories like this remind us that human kindness has no nationality.